Hello everyone, the Army of Otters here, and welcome back to the Unexplored Capital Wasteland. Today we're going to be checking out Concord, which is one of the first locations you'll visit if you just follow the main quest. Now of course, Concord, Massachusetts was a pivotal site at the start of the American Revolution. On April 19th, 1775, British troops marched into Concord to seize the colonial weapons there and arrest revolutionaries. Paul Revere and others warned the local militias who gathered to confront the British. The first shots were fired earlier that day in nearby Lexington, but the fighting intensified in Concord. At the North Bridge, colonial militias engaged British forces in a significant early battle, forcing them to retreat, and this clash marked the beginning of the armed conflict between the colonies and the British, otherwise known as the American Revolution, or the American War for Independence. So let's waste no more time and jump into the historically important Concord and its role within Fallout 4. Now I'm sure everyone at the very least has a rough idea of where Concord is, just in case you forgot. It's southeast of Sanctuary, right at the beginning of the game, because it's important for the main quest. Now as we approach Concord from Sanctuary, we will find this abandoned house, which we can actually enter. Quite unfortunately, most of the houses here are inaccessible because they're boarded up. Inside the refrigerator here, we can find a Nuka-Cola Quantum. Upstairs, we can find a bandana, and there's also a lockpick in this ashtray. Over here, behind this bed frame, we have a chem box and a bed on the ground, which can be useful to sleep and provide the player with some housing and shelter. But as I just said, most of the buildings within Concord are boarded up and are inaccessible, which is a bit disappointing because this city could be really cool for a large shootout, which does happen at the beginning of the game as we come down the main street here, which has a Celebrate History banner hanging over it, along with all of these American flags and kind of American memorabilia. We will find all of these raiders attacking the Museum of Freedom. And while this fight is okay, I do think it could have been much better. Now, as we approach the Museum of Freedom, Preston will talk to us, and we can also witness this raider just commit suicide. I was laughing my ass off as that happened. But as we approach the Museum of Freedom, Preston will talk to us and ask us to help them. We can pick up this Minutemen rifle next to a dead Minuteman. As we enter, there is a raider immediately above us, but he's pretty easy to kill. Pretty much all of the raiders within here are easy to kill, but I've also kind of played the game a lot at this point, at least for this part in the main quest, so it wasn't that hard. We enter this room, which is kind of a rendition of the Boston Massacre. However, it kind of is propagandized. It shows the Boston Massacre more from the perspective of the colonists, where actually the British soldiers did have some justification for opening fire. Obviously, the real-world situation is not so black and white as is often portrayed in American history classes. I highly recommend the HBO series John Adams to get a more realistic view of what happened during the Boston Massacre. Anyways, as we come into the next room, we will find this fusion core inside the reactor. We can just lockpick the door, or you can use the computer terminal, hack it, and get inside, both of which are novice locks, so it is pretty easy to get inside. There's also all of these pictures strewn about the Museum of Freedom. However, I did some research. I tried to use some AI to help me figure out who these people are, but it really just appears these are random pictures created by Bethesda with no real connection to the Founding Fathers. We have this awesome mural of a ship, which I'm just going to assume is the USS Constitution, which is in display in Boston, Massachusetts to this day. In fact, it's still technically in service for the US Navy, even though the ship is old as America herself. Eventually you'll come into this really epic room with this huge mural, which depicts American battles throughout history, from the Battle of Lexington and Concord, to the Battle of Iwo Jima, to the Battle of Anchorage, Alaska, which of course only takes place in the Fallout universe. Well, hopefully only takes place in the Fallout universe. And as you can see, as you make your way up throughout the Museum of Freedom, there's all of these ammo boxes and duffel bags which contain random ammo and loot, so make sure you are observant as you make your way up. Eventually we will find the Minutemen, which is led here by Preston Garvey, and they will ask us for our help. They tell us that there's a suit of power armor outside, but we need something to power it with, like a fusion core that we found a bit earlier. If you didn't pick up the fusion core, you'll have to go back throughout the museum, pick up the fusion core, and come all the way back. But since we already picked up the fusion core, we just head outside onto the roof. We can activate the power armor here and get inside. After this, we can tear off this minigun from the crashed vertibird. You don't actually need power armor to do that, but if you don't have power armor, you will need 8 strength to rip it off. And as we jump down, we will start murdering all of the raiders attacking the Museum of Freedom. And what transpires next is perhaps one of the most controversial scenes in all of Fallout. A Deathclaw rips itself out of this sewage ditch, and we have to fight him, but we are equipped with power armor and a minigun. And please remember, this is supposed to be done at the very beginning of the game. Bethesda really gives you a huge upper hand against one of the most intimidating enemies in the entire game. I do have to say it is a bit jarring and it is a bit easy for being such a low level. I remember in Fallout 3 and Fallout New Vegas, the first time I saw a Deathclaw, I freaked the fuck out. But in Fallout 4, it's not nearly as scary because of this encounter with the Deathclaw. But as we head back into the Museum of Freedom, we can talk to Preston, and we can now make an alliance with him. However long you want that to last is entirely up to you. Now, we did miss a lot at the very beginning. If we head upstairs, we can find this Roboco Fun magazine, which contains a video game inside of it. There is also a terminal which we can hack, which can unlock the gate to the fusion core downstairs, and there's also a few interesting logs inside the terminal itself talking about a cockroach infestation in the basement. Perhaps now they're rad roaches. We don't really know because obviously they died, if they were there. They died in the ensuing firefight between the Minutemen and the Raiders. And we can also find an entry from an employee that was present during the Great War with all of the nukes exploding outside. She says she's going to lock herself in a room with a gun, and please don't scare her because otherwise she will kill you. We obviously don't really know her true fate, but yeah, we can obviously assume. And up here, we can also find the Perception bobblehead on this desk. And there's also this door here that leads to this small balcony where Preston first talks to us as we approach Concord. We go outside and we have a very nice view of the main street over Concord. And there's also the Concord water tower off in the distance. Back on the rooftop, we can find this log here, which is from a pilot that obviously crashed into the Museum of Freedom, SSG Michael Daly. Now, he pretty much just talks about his experience as the bombs fell. If you're interested in hearing this recording, please stay tuned to the end of the video, where I will play the recording in its entirety. But for now, I don't want to waste your time if you just want to watch the rest of the video, so let's continue on. Now, obviously, we have this crashed vertibird up here, as we saw earlier, but if you ignore the vertibird, you can actually jump on top of the Museum of Freedom. Inside the Museum of Freedom, we can actually see a portion of the crashed vertibird. However, from what I can tell, it actually doesn't make a lot of sense as far as the outside world is concerned. Now, even after killing the Deathclaw, there might still be some raider stragglers around the area, and a lot of these shops you can enter, and you can find some good loot, such as ammunition and stuff, which might be useful in your playthrough, especially at the beginning of the game. Now, as we head to the northeastern part of the city, we will find, well, a bunch of boarded up building, which is kind of disappointing. But if we come over here, we can find a trash can, a bus stop, and along with one of these Pulaski kind of nuclear shelters that, well, they don't really work, kind of just meant as propaganda and to give people hope in the event of a nuclear apocalypse. At the end of the street here in Concord, we can find a building we can actually enter, an old house. In the refrigerator, there are some bobby pins, and upstairs we can find a cap stash, along with some empty Nuka-Cola bottles. And over here, where dog meat is looking, we can find a safe, which just has some random ammunition, some pre-war money inside of it. And just outside, if we continue east, we will find a large kind of camp with maybe some raiders. However, all of the raiders were dead for me, and all that was left was this wild mongrel, which was pretty easy to kill. After killing the mongrel, you can make your way to what appears to be an old parking lot or some kind of area for storage crates, and you can loot the dead raiders and some other things. However, well, there isn't really much down here as far as interesting loot, but there is a cooking stand. We can also find some dead settlers, which have some bottle caps and stuff on them, along with a first aid crate in the back of this truck. Now, as we head back, we can find this store just across from the Museum of Freedom. And inside of it, well, there really isn't a lot of loot. We can find some junk, which would be useful for building a settlement, so we'll go ahead and take that or maybe come back later. Now up here, the area kind of leads to this small rooftop. However, there are raiders above us, and I wanted to see if we can get up to where those raiders are. Using a beer bottle, we kind of use the walking glitch within Fallout 4, and we just kind of climb our way very slowly up to the very top of this building, and we just get some good views of Concord and the surrounding area, and we can also loot that dead raider that we killed much earlier in the video. Now, just across the street from there and next to the Museum of Freedom, we can find this old bombed-out church, and inside we find all of these skeletons. We can find some burnt textbooks on the first floor, and there also appears to be some kind of dead priest or something on this pedestal. However, well, there's no good loot. But if we go up onto the second floor, we can find, well, an expert lock safe. But rather unfortunately, we cannot unlock it yet because, well, I don't have that perk yet to unlock expert lock safes. Now we can climb all the way up into the chapel and we can get some very good views of the surrounding Concord. Also from up here, I found this very interesting, but you can actually jump on top of the tail of the vertibird, which means you might be able to actually skip a large portion of the Museum of Freedom. Don't know how that would affect the quest, if it would have any impact at all, or might lead to some funny dialogue. After that, I decided to head on over to where the Deathclaw pops out of the ground. For whatever reason, I never explored this area. I never knew it existed. And this leads us to the Concord civil access, which is really just a ton of kind of tunnels underneath Concord. They appear to be some kind of storm drain or sewage tunnels, but there is some interesting loot down here for us. We can find a dead Brahmin, a dead Mirelurk, some ammunition in this duffel bag. Perhaps they were killed by the Deathclaw. Now, there will be some mole rats down here that you'll have to deal with, but they're obviously pretty easy to kill, and Dogmeat was able to distract them a lot. Well, as you can see here, Dogmeat was fighting 3 mole rats at the same time. Thanks a lot for taking the fire. Towards the end of the pipe here, we can find a Vault-Tec lunchbox, along with a fusion core behind this metal beam. So make sure you pick up that bad boy, as we can get another fusion core inside of Concord. And after we pick up this fusion core, which for whatever reason I was scared to do, but if we go immediately to our right, we will find this small room, which has a trunk inside of it with random loot, and also a copy of Taboo tattoos, which will permanently unlock a unique tattoo for your character, so pretty cool. And then of course we can loot the steamer trunk, which had some ammunition, some chems, and other goodies inside of it. Also there's this tool crate case, which had some ammunition inside of it for me, so make sure you check it out. And there's actually another exit from the Concord Civil Access, which puts us in this alleyway right before you get to the Museum of Freedom and the church, kind of in between all of those buildings there. Now, as we head towards the southern part of Concord, well, there really isn't anything down here, but I just wanted to point out we have these signs which say entering Concord. These signs bear a very strong resemblance to the real-life signs in Concord that say, well, entering Concord. So just a pretty cool attention to detail by Bethesda. And as we head to the northern part of Concord, opposite of where we just were, we can find these 3 houses up on a hilltop alongside a really awesome car. However, unfortunately, we cannot enter any of these buildings, but we do get some pretty good views of Concord from here. After that, we head to the southwestern part of the town, and we can find this large playground, along with another house which we can enter. Again, unfortunately, most of these houses are boarded up, but there are a handful of houses which we can enter. However, all of the houses we can enter are actually very similar. Over here, we can find a cap stash, along with a medical kit inside of that house with random medical supplies. You can actually enter the UFO and the slide in the middle of the playground, and you can play around in it, kind of like how I would love to do in real life. Even though I'm an adult, I still have that inner child. Anyways, after that, we can kind of explore around the alleyways and stuff around Concord. We can find some really cool old signs and stuff like that, but rather unfortunately, there isn't a whole lot of interest as far as loot and stuff. Now, behind the Museum of Freedom, I just wanted to point out, if we head directly east of the Museum of Freedom, we will find a shopping cart out here in the middle of the woods that has some kind of food and stuff inside of it, and most importantly, a Nuka Cherry in the bottom part of the cart, so make sure you come on out here and pick up that bad boy for your adventure throughout the Commonwealth. And the last thing I wanted to mention, which I briefly mentioned earlier, is the Concord water tower is actually unique to Fallout. Most of the water towers within Fallout 4 are just generic water towers. However, for whatever reason, this one specifically says Concord on it, marking it obviously as the water tower for Concord. However, in real life, I could not find out if Concord, Massachusetts has a water tower. From what I can tell, it actually doesn't, and I did find pictures of a water tower in Concord, North Carolina, which kind of does bear some resemblance to the water tower in Fallout 4, but don't know if it had any impact. Also, as you can see, there is a first aid kit right next to the water tower at the bottom, which just has random medical supplies. Alright everyone, I think that covers Concord within Fallout 4. Obviously, I really love this location because I love American history. But what is your take on Concord? What do you think of Bethesda's interpretation of it? And of course, I'm curious to know, what is your opinion about the initial Deathclaw fight in Fallout 4? Personally, I am not a fan, but what do you think? Perhaps you have a different perspective that can give me some insight into some different ideas. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching. If you have any recommendations or ideas for future videos, future locations within Fallout 4, please post them in the comments section below. And as always, until next time.
Personal log. United States Army Staff Sergeant Michael Daly. This past Saturday, October 23rd, while en route to West Stockbridge, a vertibird crashed into the roof of this museum. The cause? EMP following nuclear detonation. Several, in fact. From the intel I've gathered, this was a global event. The co-pilot was killed on impact. Pilot died of his injuries a day later. Day after that, Flaherty and Canoa were shot by some scared, desperate survivors. Then Brzezinski took off running. Haven't seen him since. Now, it's my turn to go AWOL, if that concept even applies anymore. My armor's fusion core is burned out, so I guess my soldering days are done. I'm heading to Boston, on foot, to see if my sister survived all this. She's got an apartment on Boylston Street. This is Mike Daly, signing out. Good luck, and God bless America. Or what's left of it.